First Thessalonians, let's wrap this little letter up. Let's go chapter 5. If you want to find it somewhere in your Bible, First Thessalonians chapter 5, you want to scroll on a device or something like that. It's towards the end of the New Testament Bible. It's a very small little letter written by Paul, Silas, and Timothy, these early first century church starters, and they're writing back to a group of people who Paul's really writing this heartfelt letter of, man, I love you, I've missed you, I wish I could get back to see you, but I'm so glad the report I got back about you was encouraging and uplifting, and I'm just trying to help you with some of the things you're grappling with, some of the questions you have. He's writing back to really try and help that out, and we've been talking about some of those, including last week, Joel leading us in a really good navigation of just around that eternity and what is eternity and how it doesn't look like a lot of the things we have traditionally made it to look like. It's so much better than the very limited view we have formed about it over the course of time if we let the scriptures speak to us, and it gives us a little more excitement and a little more urgency around that. And when we dive into chapter 5, we could do just weeks on just chapter 5, but we're going to land on one little line, a couple of verses. And what I want to say at the very outset is what we're going to talk about at first hearing, it is going to sound impossible. It is going to sound impossible. I've read it and thought impossible. Other people have read it and thought that's not possible. It's impossible. And impossible, like it stirs some different emotions and thoughts in us when we think about something being impossible, right? Most of us probably can't go back quite this far in our memory, but if you could imagine just a little bit, maybe as a really little kid, and you're on a bike, but that bike has training wheels. And somebody's trying to tell you you could do it without the training wheels. And you're pretty sure they're nuts, right? You're pretty sure that training wheels is the way to go, right? But they really finally encourage you, and then somebody holds the seat like behind you, right? And if you maybe you had somebody that was nice enough to try and run behind you for a while, right? That's like that was next level love right there. Okay, they're trying to run behind you, and they've got the bike, and you're going as fast as you can, right? And you're like, man, this is freedom. Right? You didn't really have any freedom at all, right? You're still fully dependent, but somebody's telling you, no, you could do this. You could do this. And you're like, don't you dare let go, 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 right? Why? Because it feels impossible in the moment. It feels impossible. Now, sometimes impossible can be motivating, though. I actually came across a guy recently who doesn't have a bucket list. He has an impossible list. And years ago, he just made a list of all these things, like about travel and fitness and adventures and all. He looked at it and said, that's impossible. That's absolutely impossible. And it's a pretty extensive list. And over the last few decades, he's just been crossing them off. All these things that felt impossible that he has chased down and sometimes stumbled into just because he was a little more aware that he was, might be interested in something like that. He's traveled to every continent. He's traveled to 49 out of 50 states. He's done all these things physically that he thought he could never do. I mean, it's a pretty remarkable thing. So sometimes you get an impossible list that can be motivating. And today, we're going to talk about something that at first read sounds impossible. And what I want to encourage you from the front side is to just grapple with, will I hear it as something that I think I could never do, or will I hear it as something that could stir some excitement in me about what could be? And would we position ourselves to, at the end of the day, give ourselves lots of permission and even have some really meaningful imagination? 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, that's where we're going to be. We're going to start in verse 12. Verse 12, if you're scrolling there or looking for that somewhere, here's why. It's kind of coming towards the close of this little, again, heartfelt letter to people he loves, to friends, and just really people who have captured the center of Paul's being. He says, now we ask you, that's Paul, Silas, and Timothy, they're writing it collectively a little bit, brothers and sisters, to acknowledge those who work hard among you, who care for you in the Lord, and who admonish you. Hold them in the highest regard and love because of their work. Live in peace with each other. It's just really, it's them saying, hey, look, as you form as a church and as you make strides as a group of people who are following Jesus and exploring Jesus, hey, be kind, be thoughtful, be respectful, be honoring to the people around you, both paid people and volunteer people and vocational people now, who are helping further the work of Jesus in your life. Try and make things a little bit easy on them. Try and make the writer of Hebrews says, let them have some joy in what they're doing. Let them have some joy in what they're doing, right? It's like, okay, that seems possible. We can probably do that. Live in peace with each other. That feels a little bit harder, right? But it feels like, okay, maybe though, that feels loosely possible. He says, and we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle. Warn those who are idle. Warn those who are just sitting a little bit too much in their life and in their motivation, who are just a little idle spiritually, are really kind of coasting. Let's just warn them. Warn those who are disruptive, who are always stirring something up, who always seem to have a complaint, whose first comment is always negative, who just always seem like, warn those people who create discord. Encourage the disheartened, help the weak, be patient with everybody. And make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always strive to do what is good for each other and for everyone else. Now, listen, so far that feels pretty good, right? Yeah, we're probably not perfect, but let's do that. I like that. Let's encourage each other. Let's help the weak, let's nudge each other along when we get a little lazy or a little distracted. Like, let's try and shut down the disruptive and give them a course correction. That sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. Imagine if we all did that, right? I mean, remember, the letter is written to you, but it's not really about you. The letter was written to each individual in the community. It's not really about them. It's about the collection of people. It's about the community of people. It's about all of us. And this is possible. That feels possible for all of us to live that way. Now let's go verse 16, because things I feel like start to change a little bit. Verse 16. Rejoice always. I don't know if anybody's struggling yet. But do you feel like it just got harder? Encourage one another. Okay, yeah, I can do that. Rejoice always. I'm out. What? Rejoice always. What? Wait, okay, nope. Verse 17, it's going to get easier. Pray continually. Some of you have a translation that says, pray without ceasing. It feels daunting. I feel like I should just put a check in the failure column. Right? That's, yeah, okay, yep. Give thanks in all circumstances. Listen, Paul, 1 was enough. 3? Seriously? 3? You had to go 3? You got to go triplets, Paul? Maybe Paul, Silas, they all contributed 1. Right? I think we should help them rejoice all the time. I think we should help them pray continually all the time. Let's tell them to give thanks and all, But then check this out. Then we know it's not just them, because look how they end it. This is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. There's a lot of phrases like that in the Bible. We're always like, hey, I just need to know God's will. I just need to know God's will. Okay, let me start here. I just need to know God's will. Let's rejoice, always pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances. How are we doing on that part of God's will? Again, maybe I'm the only one. But doesn't that feel at least a little impossible? Really? Rejoice always? Pray constantly, give thanks, and also, Paul, have you seen the world we're living in? Paul, have you seen how challenging it is? Paul, have you tried to buy some eggs? Paul, have you turned on the news? Paul, have you seen who I live next to? Have you had my teachers? I mean, what is really happening here? Okay, but let's just sit in it for a second. If it is the will of God for people like you and me in the strength of Christ Jesus, then could we go so far as to say, well, then some level it must be possible. Or at least more of it must be possible. God hasn't designed anything and called us anything to guarantee that we would fail. He's called us out of things like sin, and out of things like selfishness, and out of qualities like self-reliance and self-dependence. He's called us out of those. He's made those possible. So what do we do? How do we do anything with it? Well, part of what's at play here is is not necessarily looking at perfection. It's looking at movement. It's looking at growth. It's looking at progress. It's celebrating the gains, not always bemoaning the gaps in our life. Right? It's celebrating the gains and the work of Jesus and what he's doing and what he's invited us into. It's not always just like bemoaning, oh, I have so far to go, woe is me. Like part of what Paul and Silas and Timothy are doing is saying, hey, let's just be inspired together. Let's imagine what could be. So if we could lump these together just a little bit, what I want to just categorize all of these under a bigger umbrella of what we could call just praise. Just praise. It includes rejoicing, it includes celebration, and even our request many times are praise, right? Our acknowledgement that God has something I need, that God could do something that I can't. Just the asking is an element of praise. But we don't want praise to stop at just the asking. When it stops at just the asking, God becomes like an object or a vendor or a store manager where we just go to kind of get what we need and leave, and that's not really what he's after. It's not really what he deserves. So how is it we could grow? How is it we could expand in this? Let's just talk about 3 ways today, really quickly, 3 ways. The first one is if we could grow underneath the umbrella of praise, if we could grow in our thinking, then we would take steps towards rejoicing always, praying continually, giving thanks in all circumstances. If we could grow in our thinking about praise. Now, here's what I know. I just said that part of our growth, part of our spiritual growth can be about thinking. And what I know is that in the great land of West Michigan, I just warmed some people's hearts. We love to think about what we're thinking about what we should be thinking about. And we love to think about how we're thinking about God and the thoughts that we should have about what we're thinking about God. We love this part, right? Anybody? Yes? It's also a very reserved culture, so the thinkers don't really want to say anything out loud. But it's true. I just know it's true, okay? Like I'm with you, okay? But what would it look like to just say, okay, but I'm going to make some moves and I'm going to think about. Well, we've got a lot of phrases. I love God. God is great. I praise God. And sometimes the way we think about it that expands our praise and makes it a little more frequent because it gets expanded is to simply take something that we often might refer to about God and expand it in a list. Expand it. God, you're great. God, you're great. The psalmist over and over and over again talks about the greatness of God, the bigness of God, the grandness of God, the majesty of God. But what does that mean? How does that get conveyed? Well, if you think about like Psalm 103, which maybe you want to read that later for the first time or again, you get the psalmist just listing things. Man, God, I'm going to bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that's within me. I'm going to praise his holy name. And I'm not going to forget a single benefit. This great God, this majestic God, he forgives all my sins. Oh yeah, he's a forgiver. He heals he's a healer, right? He rescues me. He marks my life with love and compassion. Oh, which means he is love and compassion. He has love and compassion to give. I will forget not all his benefits. One of the ways that we can think about who God is and his greatness that expands our praise, which ups the frequency of our praise, is just to not forget any benefits. Just not forget any benefits. It's to list the qualities. It's to expand on the qualities. Who they are. Recently, I was with Erica, and we happened to be with, I can't remember what the setup was, but we happened to be with one of our daughters, Sid, and I was listening to something and working through something, and the person who was kind of coaching and pushing on me from the outside said, hey, what I really want you to do is I want you to try and list 100 positive qualities about yourself. I'm like, bro, I don't list 100 qualities about anything. I'm on to the next thing after quality 21, okay? But 100 qualities. And it super challenging. You should try it. Okay? You have 100 qualities that are great about yourself because God created you marvelously. And part of how God displayed how marvelous he is by how he created you. So you do have 100. If you don't have 100, then we're discounting God somewhere along the way, right? But it is a challenge. And in that moment, in that discussion, like Erica and Sid, who again just happened to be with me in the moment, they just started speaking some of these qualities. And really what they were doing, the more I thought about really what they're doing in the moment, is they're going beyond, hey, John, or hey, Dad, I love you. They're going beyond that a little bit. And they're starting to list the ways. They're starting to list the ways. It's one thing if I repeatedly say to Erica, I love you. It's another if I can give thanks for specific qualities. Love your passion on that. Love your resilience. Love your stick-to-itiveness. Erica's been going through something for the last few years where I've just over and over been struck by how resilient she is in it. It's part of what this expanding love that I have for her. It's like, how do we take these general statements and expand them? I want to invite you to think. Think about why we love God or why we think we might love God. Think about these general, broad statements we often make. If you're reading in the scriptures somewhere and something comes up about God, especially in the Psalms, which are a lot of written songs and journal entries, you just read them and stop along the way and say, okay, God is great or God is mighty. Let me just play it out. Let me expand it a little bit. What does that really mean that God is mighty? What does it really mean that God rescued me? Rescued me from what? Think about, if you're here today and you're a follower of Jesus or you join online, you're a follower of Jesus, just ask on occasion, hey, what if Jesus hadn't rescued me? Think about the counterfactual play of your life. What if Jesus hadn't rescued me? Where would my life be if Jesus hadn't rescued me? If I had been left to just me, I mean, for some of us, that's a horrifying thought, right? We know we've been rescued from a lot. It's like, okay, yeah, like, how can we just think? Let me give you another one. There's just this element that is not the converse of thinking. It's actually a partner to thinking, but it is this reality of experiencing, where we allow ourselves in our praise, in our amazement, in our adoration, we allow ourselves to experience Him. Some of you may have sensed this at times in your life. A guy named Timothy Keller, who was a great pastor and leader and thinker and writer, he said, when we worship God, if we make ourselves available, there will be these times where we uniquely experience His presence on our hearts. And sometimes it will be light, and other times it will be heavy. And I might add, it might always be good. Might always be good. We experience like this, the presence of God. The supernatural becomes supernaturally tangible. Listen, the supernatural becomes supernaturally tangible. There's a touch, there's a feel, there's an experience, an encounter, there's a sound, there's a sense. If we allow ourselves to become open, it might expand our experience. And as our experience expands, so does our gratefulness. So does our rejoicing. So does our willingness and eagerness to pray to the God who seemingly is getting bigger to us. Okay? It's because we've allowed ourselves to experience. Look, and life is better with experiences. I know we're in a thinking culture, but life is better with experiences to go with those thoughts. Okay? Any fans, both locations and online, any fans of chocolate chip cookies? Yes, can I get a, oh, struck a chord right there. All right, well, okay. I don't have any for you, okay? But here's it, like, isn't there something about the chocolate chip cookie, the look, the smell, Some of you like the kind of hard and crunchy chocolate chip cookies. Others of you like it when it's warm and it's like soft and it's melting still. And you kind of like the chocolate chip cookie to have the same effect as a sloppy Joe. You want it to be really messy. Like that's when it's good, right? There's something about the chocolate chip cookie, right? It's really good. A chocolate chip cookie, like it's one thing to like know that the chocolate chip cookie is a chocolate chip cookie. But thank the Lord, it is different to experience the chocolate chip cookie. Right? It's different when you experience it. Pastor Caleb, who was with us for a couple years, and then we launched out with Synergy, this local disciple-making movement and expression of the church here in the West Michigan area. Caleb, he experiences things to the fullest. Life is an experience that Caleb feels deeply. And I remember one time I was getting to know Caleb. We hadn't been together that long, and Caleb was telling me, it happened to be, we were in my office, and he's telling me about some cookies that his wife, Allie, had made a couple days before, and how many of them he had eaten. And Caleb's in this chair, and he's sitting there, and he's talking about these cookies, and he just throws his head back with this, like, this full of life expression of, they were so good. A cookie? Like, you're going that far for a cookie? I'm like, well, maybe I'm missing out on something, right? But what Caleb didn't know the facts about the cookie. He probably did, but Caleb knew an experience with the cookie, right? An experience. Like, man, I tasted the cookie. Listen, listen. You gotta hear this. You gotta hear this. If we want to experience what seems impossible, we got to keep growing at our willingness to experience God, not just know about God. We got to grow in our willingness. And because of the type of culture we're in, this is not a bad thing about our culture. This is not a condemnation about our culture. It's a reality about our culture. Because we can lean towards thinking, we can miss a lot of the experience. And God created both. God created your brain, and God created your heart and your soul and the experiences that go with that. And for some of us, that's going to feel risky, a little vulnerable. It's okay. It's okay. Again, if you look at the psalmist, especially, which is full of praise, man, it's just experience after experience after experience. From the depth of tragedy to the highest of accomplishment and successes. Thinking and experiencing. And then there's just this other reality of we'll grow. It will become more frequent to us when we're expressing, when we're actually like letting out our rejoicing, when we are sharing our thankfulness, when we are expressing our joy, our eagerness. Let me read you this quote from C.S. Lewis. Great thinker, right? He said this: we delight to praise what we enjoy. He's talking about God here, obviously. He says, we delight to praise what we enjoy because the praise not merely expresses, but completes the enjoyment. Just check it out. The praise completes the enjoyment. The expression completes the enjoyment. There is an enjoyment about being with God. God is joy, and in his presence is the fullness, the completeness, the perfection of joy. And yet, when we experience this joy, like the joy has a limit until it's expressed. The joy has a limit until it's expressed. When Jesus went to a cross, part of what the scriptures tell us about him is that he did it in part for the joy set before him. His joy gets a chance to complete when he expresses the joy, when he expresses the love. And there are lots of ways we do that, but a large portion of the way that God created and handed us to do that is through what we sing. Again, that's not new to us. There's thousands and thousands of years of history with that, including early in the Old Testament. It's part of how we express it. And why is that so helpful? And what might we be missing if we don't engage it? Now, can I just talk to my non-musical friends for a minute here? Okay. Look, part of the reason I sit in the front here is to make some transition stuff easier. But another part is I sing loud and I sing bad. And that is a bad combination, okay? Loud and bad, okay? And outside of this room and outside of Sundays, I don't sing a lot. It's not my primary way of connecting with God. There's a couple of people in my family, it is. It's their thing, music all the time, right? It's great. Some of you, it's like the most natural, obvious thing ever. For some of us, it's like, oh, can we just get to some teaching? Like, it's like I'm just looking for a teaching church, okay? Right? But listen. Why singing? Have you ever noticed how sometimes a song can put to words what you cannot quite put to words yourself? You ever notice how a song, sometimes you hear it, and it just feels like it kind of came out of you, and at the same time it was kind of for you? It's crazy how that works, isn't it? Why is that? Because it is one of the avenues of us having the opportunity to express our joy about the God that we are expanding our thinking and expanding our experience with. That's why again, the psalmist, Psalm 150, if you want one, for example, it talks about, man, everything that has some breath, let them praise, let them sing, let them clap, let them play instruments, let them crash cymbals together loudly, right? Why is that? Because there is something that comes out of us in the moment that our own words might not capture. Our own words might not capture. My grandpa was saved a little bit later in life. He met Jesus when he was probably late 20s. Early 30s, and had been through World War II and all those things, grew up in a terrible environment. And the Lord just really miraculously rescued him. He did what he came to do, And my grandpa loved Jesus with all he had. Man, he just loved him like crazy. And one of the things I had to do when I was little is ride around sometimes with my grandpa, and we'd be in a car, and usually it was in his truck or something. And he was a 2-foot driver, so it was a little jerky on occasion. But 2-foot driver on an automatic, not a stick. So it's a little choppy on occasion. But one of the things that I loved was just on occasion, he would just start singing. He'd just start singing. He had a fairly good voice, too. He'd just start singing. And more times than not, it was the song. I just want to read you some of these lyrics. I already said I'm bad, so I'm not going to sing it. But I do want to read you some of these lyrics. I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be his than have riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or lands. I'd rather be led by his nail-pierced hand. He's sweeter than honey from out of the comb. He's all that my hungering spirit needs. I'd rather have Jesus and let him lead. And I think part of the reason my grandpa went back to that song so many times is because it put to words what he didn't know how to put to words. He had met a Jesus that satisfied his hungry soul. He had met a Jesus that was greater than the world he had seen. That was greater than anything he was going to accomplish or gather or compile. He'd be so into it sometimes. I'll never forget. He'd be so into this, singing this song sometimes while we were driving. He'd get to these moments and he would just hit the steering wheel, like all this enthusiasm, right? Just hit the steering wheel with excitement. Because I think he was singing some things he probably couldn't have put to words himself. In the fall of 2002, I went to a conference with a friend, and when I went, I was at this place in my life where I did feel like, man, I kind of need something for God. I was like seeking the Lord, hoping he would answer, like we talked about earlier. I was in a good place with God, but I was like, I just sensed there's something stirring in me, something new, and I couldn't quite get what it is. I needed like God to expand my imagination again about something or who he was, And yet I was going to a conference where I didn't think that's what was going to happen. Like, I didn't think that was the point of the conference, right? And it's October of 2002, first week of October 2002. And I get in this environment. And it's a Jesus following conference, so I'm not surprised at all when they start actually using some music. And I hear this song I'd never heard this song before. And while I'm sitting there, I was probably like in the fourth or fifth row on an aisle, because it's just where I am, and I'm listening, and then I'm participating, and I find myself singing these lyrics. God is bigger than the air I breathe. The world will leave. God will save the day. And all will say, my glorious. And all you, God, ever do is change the old for new. And so, people, we believe that God is bigger than the air I breathe. And we sang that. I don't know whose idea it was, but that was like the theme song. We sang it every stinking session. And it wasn't quite enough for me. Because that song was putting into words something I would not have been able to put to words myself. I needed, again, to encounter a God that was bigger than the very air I breathe and the world that we will one day leave. And it was in that conference in the first week of October in 2002 that the very earliest, smallest seeds of starting a church one day began to be planted in my life. It was nowhere on my radar. It was nowhere. And a song was just part of what God used to allow me to experience a little more of him, to express the longing of my heart that I couldn't quite get words to, which went on to expand my thinking about who he is and how he works and what he just might be able to invite us into. Now, here's the thing. These three little admonitions that Paul and his buddies wrote, they feel impossible. They feel impossible. What I want to invite you to do today, because they do feel so impossible, what I want to invite you to do is give yourself a little permission and exercise your imagination. Give yourself permission, exercise your imagination. In order to do it, from middle, I want to hand this back to you so you can navigate this response together. And what I want to do is just allow us to say, what would it look like to give myself permission to not be perfect and rejoice always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances, but to be growing, to be expanding. Because as I'm expanding my thinking and my experiences and my expressions, I am going to see and encounter a bigger, more nuanced and beautiful God than I have before, and it will expand my praise. And I will celebrate the gains, not bemoan the gaps. So what if I fail? What if I fail? What if I fail? You will. We will. But I want to show you a quote from a guy named Thomas Keating. It's a great quote. He says this: if your mind in prayer gets distracted 1,000 times in 10 minutes of prayer, that's cool, because it's 1,000 times to come back to God again. What if you just give yourself a little permission, a little grace? Huh? Peter, who ended up being the leader of the first century church, that guy fell asleep praying when Jesus needed him most. There's hope for you, my friend. There's hope for me. There's hope for me. And so here's what we do with some imagination. Now that you're giving yourself some permission, I want to just ask. Think about your life a year from now. If that's too far, 6 months. If that's too far, 3 months from now. Think about your life 90 days from now. And just say, what could my life look like? What could my relationship, my trust, my celebration, my excitement about God be if I just allow myself to expand my thinking and my experiencing and my expressing around who he is? What could my life be like? What could I see God do? What could I notice? How many times could God blow my mind? How many times could God expand the way I see him? How many things that are big now would feel small then? And go ahead and flip it. Let your imagination run wild on what your life will be like if you don't do that. What if you don't? What if you walk out today and you're like, whatever. Play it out both ways. Let your imagination run. And just maybe, like the high mark, the lofty shot here that Paul took when he wrote it, just maybe it's not something to make us feel bad. It's something to compel us to say, whoa, that's possible. That's possible. I'm going to go get that. I'm going to let myself be available to that. Would you? With some permission and lots of imagination.